welcome to the explainer. Have you ever just looked at something at work and thought, why on earth are we still doing this? It's that feeling, right? When smart, successful companies get totally stuck with obviously broken processes. Well, today, we're going to dig into that. We're going to break down this invisible force called organizational inertia and look at a really practical toolkit to finally overcome it.
All right, here's the game plan. We'll kick things off with the paradox of why change fails so often. Then we'll define what it really means for a company to be stuck. And then, the core of our discussion, we're going to dive deep into the 5 forces of inertia. After that, we'll shift to solutions, a practical, evidence-based toolkit for breaking that cycle and, actually finding a path forward. So, let's jump in.
Okay, first up, the paradox. Let's really get into why so many big change initiatives seem to fail right out of the gate.
So this really is the big question for today. I mean, we've all been there, right? Filling out those same forms over and over, wrestling with clunky, ancient software, or sitting through meetings that could have been an email. And all the while, you're thinking, there has to be a better way. It's just baffling, isn't it?
And you know what? The stakes here are incredibly high. Check this out. Research cited by McKinsey throws out a just staggering number. 70%. 70% of all major change programs fail to hit their goals. And one of the biggest reasons, the main culprit, is this powerful, often invisible force we're talking about today, organizational inertia.
All right, that brings us to our next section, the anatomy of stuck. So what exactly is this gravity that keeps us trapped in old ways? Let's put a name to it and define the problem.
So here's the textbook definition. At its core, organizational inertia is just a company's deep-seated tendency to keep things the way they are, to stick with the status quo. And this happens even when there are clearly better ways of doing things staring them right in the face. A good way to think about it is like the default setting on a machine. It just stays that way unless you actively change it.
But here's a really important point. This isn't just about people being lazy. That's a huge misconception. The research is clear. Inertia is actually an active system. It's made up of all these interconnected forces that are all working together, sometimes without anyone even realizing it, to resist change.
So, that leads us right into the heart of our explainer, the 5 forces of inertia. Look, to overcome this resistance, you can't just fight it head-on. You first have to understand it. You have to diagnose it. So let's break inertia down into its 5 key components.
Think of this as our roadmap for the next few minutes. Because, as you can see, inertia isn't just one big, vague problem. Oh no, it's actually 5 different interconnected issues. You've got cognitive, behavioral, socio-cognitive, economic, and political forces all at play. Let's break each one of these down one by one.
First up, number 1, cognitive inertia. This one happens at the top. It's all about how leaders and managers see the world, or more importantly, how they fail to see the need for change.
And get this, one study found that a whopping 68% of leaders point to this insight inertia as a huge barrier. It's basically a failure to even recognize or accept that a big change is needed in the first place. They just don't see it.
And here's the thing, it's not always an accident. A lot of the time, it's a conscious choice. Think about it. Managers are rewarded for delivering predictable, stable results. So, that inefficient process that it feels a lot safer than the scary, uncertain world of trying something new.
Okay, next up, number 2, behavioral inertia. So now we're moving from the manager's mind down to the day-to-day habits of, everyone. This is all about the incredible power of routine.
And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? Familiarity beats efficiency. On a deep biological level, our brains are wired to take the easy path, the familiar one. Why? Because it uses less energy. Breaking a habit, learning a new way, that takes real mental effort, and our brains are basically programmed to be lazy and avoid that.
All right, our third force is socio-cognitive inertia. Now, this is where things get really sticky, because this is where a bad process gets all tangled up in the company's culture and its very identity.
See, at this stage, a process isn't just a workflow anymore. It becomes a symbol of how we do things around here. And if you question it, well, it can feel like you're questioning the tribe itself. This leads to this really dangerous thing called the spiral of silence. It's where, say, everyone privately hates that pointless weekly status report, but nobody speaks up because they all think, oh, it must just be me. And so everyone conforms, creating this completely false sense of agreement.
Okay, number 4. This one's a big one. Economic inertia.
And unlike some of the others, this can feel really rational. Because, yeah, this one is all about the money.
This is basically the classic sunk cost fallacy, but blown up to an organization-wide scale. The company's already poured millions into some old piece of software and all the training that went with it, so the cost of switching to something new just feels massive. It feels so huge that sticking with the broken old way actually seems like the smarter financial move, even when it's absolutely not.
And that brings us to our fifth and final force, political inertia. Oh yeah, this is where bad processes aren't just tolerated, they're actively protected because they help out a powerful person or group.
So a process might be a total nightmare for the company as a whole, but maybe it gives one department a little more control. Or maybe it protects a certain manager's budget. Or it could even be there to please one single really important client. And what happens? You get these political deadlocks, where any attempt to change things gets shut down immediately to protect those special interests. Whew! Okay, so that brings us to Section 4, breaking the cycle. We've just diagnosed the 5 big forces holding things back. The big question now is, what can we actually do about them? I know, after hearing about all 5 of those forces, the cognitive, the behavioral, the social, the economic, and the political, and how they all feed into each other, it's pretty easy to feel a little hopeless. So, are we just doomed to repeat the same mistakes forever? Well, the evidence says a clear and loud no. But, and this is a big but, the solution isn't just another memo from the top or some massive disruptive overhaul. The real antidote is a much smarter, more modern approach called evidence-based change management.
Which leads us to our toolkit. With an evidence-based approach, you're not trying to fight inertia with brute force. That never works. Instead, you get a toolkit of smart, practical little interventions that are designed to chip away at inertia right at its source.
And the key thing to get here is that this isn't about one giant, dramatic change. It's about a series of small, smart, targeted moves. So let's look at 3 of the most effective tools in the box. First, establishing crystal clear ownership. Second, using something called choice architecture to kind of nudge behavior. And third, making the invisible costs of doing things the old way visible.
Okay, let's start with that first one. You have to assign a process owner. Think about it. So many bad processes live in the gaps between departments. Nobody truly owns them. So a process owner is a single senior person who is held accountable for that process from the very beginning to the very end. The key is they have both the power and the reason to actually fix it.
All right, second tool, we use this brilliant idea from behavioral science called choice architecture. The idea is simple. Instead of trying to force people to change, you just make the better process the easiest one. You make it the path of least resistance. You just change the default setting. So now, to use the old way, you have to actively opt out and, this is key, give a reason. Suddenly, you're using that behavioral inertia to work for you, not against you. And this connects right to our third tool, which is making those invisible costs visible. Forcing someone to write down a reason for using the old system, that makes the cost of sticking with it explicit. You can also do this by, say, calculating and sharing just how many hours are wasted each week on that bad process. When people actually see the real cost in black and white, that economic inertia starts to lose its grip.
Okay, so that brings us to our final section, a path forward. How do you put all this together and make change actually stick?
And you know, this quote really sums it all up perfectly. To kill a bad process, real, lasting change, it doesn't happen by committee. It just doesn't. It needs one senior owner who is on the hook for the whole thing, and a series of smart nudges that make the new, better way the default, easy option.
So that leaves us with one last question for you to think about. Just picture your own organization right now. What's that one frustrating, broken process that just persists year after year? And now, ask yourself, does it stick around simply because no single person has the clear authority to fix it? And what do you think could happen? What could really change if it finally had an owner?